Next, we have another episode of our short but amazing weekly series. Alan Alda is an award-winning actor, writer, director, and now podcaster. He had a very clear understanding with the Pentagon that there would be no guns at 88. Alan Alda finally admits how much he really hated him. Alan Alda wasn't as perfect as you might think on MASH. He often argued with a co-star he couldn't stand. Why did the show lose its charm? Who did Alan Alda dislike? Get ready to find out who did it and learn more interesting facts about MASH. Tensions behind the scenes. While filming the second season of MASH, there was some drama behind the scenes between Alan Alda, the beloved actor who played Hawkeye Pierce, and Jackie Cooper, the show's director. It looks like they had different ideas about how things should be done on set. Alan, who is known for his quick wit and improvisational skills, wanted more creative freedom. For Alan wanted to explore the characters and add his own style to Hawkeye, but he felt limited by Jackie's traditional way of directing. Jackie, on the other hand, was an experienced professional who had been in the business for a long time, and he probably expected the actors to stick to the script and follow his instructions to the letter. This difference in working styles caused some tension between the two, with Alan wanting to explore the characters and add his own style to Hawkeye. Alan really cared about the show and wanted it to be the best it could be, but he thought Jackie wasn't putting in the same amount of work or passion, which annoyed him. Jackie, on the other hand, had a different view and thought Alan was hard to work with because he was stubborn and wanted things to be done his way, which meant he didn't always consider other people's ideas or suggestions, which could be annoying for a Jackie, who was used to being in charge. Also thought that Alan tried to take over the scenes, which made it hard for him to do his job. It's like when you're building something with Legos and someone keeps taking the pieces away and telling you how to put them together. Not fun at all. That's probably how Jackie felt working with Alan. It looks like their problem was a clash of personalities and different ideas about how the show should be run. Alan wanted more creative freedom and Jackie wanted to be in charge. A more collaborative environment, while Jackie liked a more traditional one where he was in charge, they both had strong opinions and didn't always agree, which caused tension between them. The magic of MASH, was it just their different ideas that made Alan not like Jackie, or was it something more? Before we get into that, let's talk about the show. MASH was a famous TV show based on a book that ran from 1972 to 1983. It was set during the Korean War and followed the lives of the people working there. Many people loved this famous TV show, which was a mix of comedy and drama and took place at a mobile army surgical hospital. It was more than just a comedy. It was a story about doctors and nurses working hard to save lives in the face of the harsh realities of war. The characters, who had to deal with problems every day, found ways to stay positive and find humor in even the worst situations. Hawkeye Pierce was a fan favorite. He was smart and funny. Trapper John McIntyre, played by Wayne Rogers, was Hawkeye's best friend and always up for a good time. He often joined Hawkeye in his tricks and mischief, but MASH wasn't just about Hawkeye and Trapper. It had a whole cast of unforgettable characters. Loretta Swit played the strict but caring head nurse Margaret Houlihan, and Jamie Farr made everyone laugh as the flamboyant Corporal Maxwell Linger, who always tried to get out of jail by dressing in women's clothes. Each character brought something unique to the show with their own personality and quirks. This is what made MASH so great. It was the perfect mix of comedy and drama. One minute you'd be laughing at Hawkeye's antics, and the next you'd be crying for the soldiers who were hurt or the emotional toll of war. The show wasn't afraid to deal with tough topics or explore deep emotions, which is why so many people loved it. It's no wonder it's one of the most beloved shows of all time. Even decades after the last episode aired, there were still secrets and surprises on set. Here's a fun fact you might not know. Lance Stephenson, who played the likable but sometimes clumsy Colonel Henry Blake, wanted to play Hawkeye Pierce, the witty and charming surgeon who became Alan Alda's famous role. Can you imagine Lance Stephenson giving Hawkeye sarcastic one-liners? It's an interesting thought experiment, and Stephenson's desire to play Hawkeye shows something that happens to a lot of actors. Like everyone else, actors have their own preferences and goals. Sometimes they get their dream roles, and sometimes they don't. But in the case of Lance Stephenson, it looks like fate had other plans. Believe it or not, some of the actors on MASH served in the military before they joined the show. For example, Jamie Farr, who played the likable and odd Corporal Klinger, actually served in the U.S. military. Army for 2 years and was stationed in Japan and Korea after the war ended. His time in the military gave him a unique view on the lives of soldiers. Alan Ayla, the show's star, also had a military background. He was in the Army Reserves and was stationed in Korea for 6 months. He wasn't directly involved in combat, but his time there probably shaped his role as Hawkeye Pierce, the smart and caring surgeon. It wasn't just Jamie Farr who had experienced military life before MASH. Alan Allen also served in the Army Reserves after graduating from college. While the specifics of his service aren't widely known, his time in the military must have given him a good understanding of how the Army worked. This experience probably made Allen's portrayal of Hawkeye even more believable, as he could use his own military knowledge to make his character and the situations he faced in the show seem more real. It's like when you watch a space movie and it turns out the director actually lived in space. Some people think Alan Alda's real rival on the show was Jackie Cooper, who played the director, while others think it was Mike Frell, who played BJ Hutt. Why? Well, there was definitely a competitive vibe between them on screen. They were always trying to outdo each other with jokes and pranks and prove who was the better doctor. Alan himself wrote about this friendly rivalry in his book Never Have Your Dog. I've learned that he and Mike would compete in silly ways, like seeing who could learn to stand on their hands first. It was all in good fun, and it made working together even more fun. Interestingly, Alan wrote in his book that he learned judo while he was in the Army, which may explain why he was so up for physical challenges and fun competitions with Mike. But even though they were friends, their physical interactions weren't always just fun. Alan wrote that whenever he was told to sit down, Frail would playfully try to trip him up and knock him down. But their relationship wasn't always fun in games. There were times when they didn't agree on how their character should act. For example, in one episode, Mike thought his character, BJ Hutt, was acting in a way that wasn't like him, which caused a bit of a fight with Alan, who may have had a different take on the scene. It's normal for actors to care about their characters and want to make sure they make a memorable impression. Alan and Mike probably didn't agree on how to portray BJ's behavior because they both wanted what was best for their characters on the show as a whole, even if they had different opinions at times. The untold stories of casting, besides Alan and Mike's disagreements, there are other interesting stories about actors who turned down roles in MASH that could have changed their careers. For example, comedian Robert Clean was offered the part of Trapper John McIntyre, Hawkeye's partner in crime. Imagine if Robert Clean, the funny guy known for his stand-up comedy, could have been in the iconic MASH cast, but for some reason, he didn't. Even though MASH became a huge hit, Klein didn't seem to regret his choice. He went on to have a great career as a comedian, appearing in over 100 movies and TV shows. It's clear that he found his own way to success without the boost of being on a popular show like MASH. Another interesting casting fact is about Wayne Rogers, who played the charismatic Trapper John. Most actors sign contracts when they join a TV show, but Wayne never did. This meant he could leave the show whenever he wanted without any legal consequences. Imagine how surprised the MASH team was every time Wayne decided to go on vacation. It must have been quite the feat to keep the show running smoothly with one of the main characters coming and going as he pleased. Klinger, played by Jamie Farr, was a fan favorite on MASH, but did you know he wasn't supposed to be a regular? The show, he was only supposed to be in one episode and was supposed to be gay at first, but Klinger's strange personality and funny antics won over the viewers, and the producers decided to keep him on. As MASH continued to air, something strange began to happen. The laughter track, which is usually the sound of a studio audience laughing along, began to fade away. It wasn't a sudden change. The laughter became less frequent and less noticeable over time. This change reflected a shift in the show's tone and direction. In the early days of MASH, the show's creators wanted to try something new. They didn't think a laugh track, which is recorded laughter that you hear in some sitcoms, fit with the show's tone. They wanted viewers to know that even though MASH was funny, it was also about serious things like war and loss. But CBS, the network that showed the show, didn't agree. They wanted a laugh track, which was pretty common at the time. After some back and forth, the creators, CBS, and the producers came to an agreement. They would keep the laugh track, but they could film some scenes without it, like the ones in the operating room. This was a small win for the producers, who wanted to make those scenes feel more real and dramatic. As the show went on, the laughter became less noticeable. It wasn't gone completely, but it was quieter and used less often. This showed that MASH was growing up and becoming more serious as it dealt with darker topics. It was still funny, but there wasn't always as much lighthearted humor as there was in the beginning. The first episode of MASH, which aired on September 17, 1972, was a huge hit. It was even nominated for 2 Emmy Awards, one for director G. Reynolds and one for writer Larry Gilbert. And what's even more impressive is that Gilbert wrote the whole episode in just 3 days. That's like writing a whole book report in one night, but way cooler. With all the awards and praise the pilot episode got, even though it was written quickly, it still managed to capture viewers' hearts and become a beloved classic. But there was a secret that the cast didn't know at the time. Alda, who played Hawkeye, was the only one who knew that Colonel Henry Blake was going to die. Imagine being in the MASH cast and finding out all of a sudden that a major character was going to die. That's exactly what happened when Colonel Blake was suddenly killed off. The other actors weren't told about this plot twist until right before filming the emotional scene. It must have been a shock for everyone, especially since Blake was such a beloved character. But surprise plots weren't the only thing that kept MASH interesting. The show also had guest appearances by famous actors like a young Ron Howard, who was famous for his roles in Happy Days and American Graffiti, or the funny Leslie Nielsen from Airplane. Having the Naked Gun show up, even Patrick Sue the heartthrob from Dirty Dancing visited the MASH set. These guest appearances made the show more exciting and helped bring in even more viewers. Another interesting fact about MASH is that it ran for a lot longer than the Korean War. The war only lasted for 3 years, but the show ran for 11 seasons. That's like watching your favorite movie over and over again, but with new plot twists. With a whopping 256 shows, MASH kept fans interested. People watched the show for over 10 years. But did you know that Alda did more than just act in it? He directed 31 episodes and co-wrote 13 of them. This talented man wasn't just a pretty face, he was also a creative force behind the camera. Speaking of creative forces behind the camera, let's talk about Radar's bear. Remember that cute little teddy bear that Radar always carried around? It was like his trusty sidekick. It was always there for him when things got tough. But after the show ended, no one knew what happened to the bear. Radar's beloved teddy bear was thought to have been lost for 30 years, a relic from the show's past, but in a shocking turn of events, the bear showed up at an auction, and guess who bought it? Gary Berghoff, the actor who played Radar. It must have been a special moment for him to reunite with a beloved part of his character's life. Even though MASH had a core group of beloved characters, some of the smaller roles were just as memorable. For example, in an episode from 1977, the characters were named after the California Angels baseball team. It's a fun fact that shows how much thought and creativity went into every part of the show, even the minor ones. But here's where things get interesting. One of the characters was named after the ex-girlfriend of a writer. It's not clear who exactly inspired the character, but some people think it was Patty Haven. Whether it was a loving gesture or a jab, it's an interesting fact that adds another layer of mystery to the show's history. As MASH went on, the actors started to be more involved in the creative process. Sometimes disagreements on set can lead to some interesting strategies. When the actors on MASH started to say what they thought about the plots, the creative team chose to take a fun but tough approach to the plots. They made the actors film scenes in heavy winter clothes, even though it was very hot outside. This was probably a way for the producers to show who was in charge and assert their authority. But despite these problems behind the scenes, MASH continued to entertain and win over viewers. After the show ended, a few spin-offs were made, including one about the beloved character Radar O'Reilly. Radar came home from the war, but his life didn't go exactly as planned. He dealt with heartbreak and loss and eventually became a detective. Sadly, this spin-off only aired once, but it's an interesting look at what could have been for Radar's character. Another character who got lucky was Klinger, who was only supposed to make an appearance once, but became so popular with his weird personality and cross-dressing antics that the producers decided to make him a regular on the show. It just goes to show that sometimes the most unexpected characters show up. One of the sweetest things about MASH was how close the actors were to their characters' families. For example, Mike Frell, who played BJ Hutt, named his character's daughter, Erin, after his own daughter, Erin. It was a sweet tribute and a way for him to bring a part of his personal life into the show. Another fun fact is that the picture of Colonel Daughter's wife Mildred on his desk wasn't just a prop, it was a picture of Harry Morgan's real-life wife. Colonel Potter's character felt more real and warm thanks to Jackie Cooper, who directed some episodes of MASH and later wrote an autobiography called Please Don't Shoot My Dog, Mr. In it, he talked about working with Alda and how he felt Alan was always trying to add liberal ideas to the scripts. Jackie just wanted Alan to stick to his act and leave the politics out of it. He thought Alan was crossing his lines and trying to push his own agenda onto the show during the first 2 seasons. Jackie was directing, and he and Alan didn't get along very well. They barely spoke to each other. but they never said they didn't like each other. It seems like their creative differences and personal problems made for a tense working relationship. Despite the drama behind the scenes, MASH continued to be a success, and the final episode was a huge deal. It was watched by millions of people across America and became one of the most watched TV shows of all time. But did you know that it wasn't really the last one that was filmed? It's a little-known fact that another episode called As Time Goes By was filmed after the official finale. This adds another layer to the history of the show. Even after MASH ended, Loretta Swit, who played Major Houlihan, stayed close with her co-stars, especially Harry Morgan. It's great to know that the friendships that were made on set lasted long after the cameras stopped rolling.